The stronger you are, the better a runner you will be. However, when time is limited, it is tempting to focus purely on the running. Well, what if I said that with one piece of equipment, you could get a full running strength-focused workout done? Okay, let me introduce this, the kettlebell. And I'm going to share with you 6 exercises that will help your running. Well, now you know what's in store for this video. I'm going to take a moment to ask you a favor. Your support allows us to make these videos. So we would love it if you're enjoying this, if you hit the like button. And if you're new to GTN and you want to join, then you can do so by subscribing. Now, I could go into all the reasons that kettlebells are a great piece of kit and why everyone should have at least one of these at home, but I think the exercises are going to prove that themselves. So we're starting off with the classic, the kettlebell swing. So stand with your feet just wider than hip width apart, having soft knees, and bend down to pick up the kettlebell with your knuckles facing away from you. Picture your arms as rope. They're attached to the kettlebell, but will only be holding the weight, not driving any of the movement. And as you come into standing, think of squeezing your glutes and extending and pushing forwards your hips. It might take a couple of swings to find the full momentum and rhythm, allowing the kettlebell to swing backwards between your legs, then driving it up in front of you. Now, the key points to focus on are driving from the hips. It needs to be quite a fast and strong movement, your glutes really getting activated, and your torso needs to remain sort of taut and being able to support you, and your arms, like I mentioned earlier, are just connected to the kettlebell. You want to make sure that your eyes are looking forwards just to keep everything in line. And when it comes to the height that the kettlebell comes up, you just want to go with what feels natural. If you're forcing that up, then it means you're going to be using your shoulders as opposed to letting your hips do the work. So you'll find somewhere where it naturally reaches. And you will soon find after a few of these, if you're doing them properly, it wakes up the posterior chain, which basically by that we mean all the muscles at the sort of backside of your body, which are really key to running and also great for contradicting that position we spend so long sat at our desks in these days. This is another compound movement, one that gets several joints moving and therefore several muscle groups engaged. It's basically a version of the classic squat, just with the weight held in front of you. So holding the kettlebell upside down, close to your chest, feet just wider than hips, your eyes facing forwards. You want to squat down as far as you can whilst keeping good form. Now focus on your lower back here. If you start to feel that round, you've gone too far. And from that point, or just before that point, then drive back up to standing. Now this predominantly targets your legs, your glutes, your quads, your calves, and even a little bit of your hamstrings, whilst obviously still activating and using a little bit of your shoulders and your core. Now finally, a note on this. You can hold it like I am here, but obviously experiment with what works for you. Another way which I find quite comfortable is holding it by the sort of arms of the kettlebell, but just keep it nice and close to your chest. This is a simple yet often overlooked exercise and one that really should be part of any runner's strength program. If you are new to this, then I'd suggest starting off with body weight, but the idea is to progress to doing weighted calf raises. Hold the kettlebell on your chest like we did in the goblet squat, and then focus on standing tall. Simply push up onto your toes and lower in a controlled manner. If you're doing this correctly, you'll soon start to feel the burn. In the ideal world, find a shallow step and stand with the balls of your feet on it and your heels over the edge. Then lower your heels, putting your ankle into more dorsiflexion. From here, push all the way up onto your tiptoes. This creates a much larger range of movement and correlates more directly with the movement seen in running. Now for this, it's far more important to have range and good control than it is to worry about weight. So definitely start with just body weight, and once you've got that and you feel ready, you've built up enough repetitions, you can then add in the kettlebell. Presuming you've only got a single kettlebell, we're going to do single arm bent over rows. Start off in a squat position and then bend over the kettlebell, hold it with one hand. Trying to keep your back as still as possible, lift the kettlebell and pull it upwards towards you, bringing your elbow back behind you before lowering back down towards the ground. Now there are small variations you can do, so play around with what works for you. I personally like to have my knuckles facing forwards at the start and then I rotate it and pull it back around. Now it's actually the latter part of this movement that correlates really closely to running, as well as obviously activating all those muscles on your back body. This exercise has recently become more popular thanks to the rise of high rocks, so you might well be familiar with it, but we're going to presume that you've only got one kettlebell, or at least one kettlebell of each weight, so we're going to do a single arm farmer's walk. Now, The key for this is your starting position. So you're going to hold your kettlebell in one hand with your arms straight, just relaxed by your side, ideally in front of a mirror, and you want to check that your posture is nice and level. So your shoulders are level and your shoulders are set back and upright. And then you're simply going to walk forwards 20 paces, turn around, walk back, swap hands and repeat on the other side. Now, the whole time focusing on thinking of standing tall, being level and symmetrical. And you should start to feel your core really being activated, but your shoulders and your legs doing some work too. Time to focus on your core. Now, if you have been following these exercises along as you've been watching this video, you will be aware that your core has already been activated. But this exercise is going to take it to the next level. You will certainly start to feel the burn all around your torso area. So sitting on the floor with your knees bent to around 110 degrees, you want to pick up the kettlebell with both hands and lean your back towards the mat before opening up your hips. Start with just a small movement, and then you can always make it harder once you know the exercise. And then move the kettlebell over your stomach and down to the ground next to your torso, gently tapping the mat before returning to the center and repeating the movement on the other side. Now, believe it or not, that is the gentle version. If you want to spice things up and make it a little bit harder, you can take your feet off the ground and then you can start to open up this angle at your hips. So the further your feet are away from your hips and the further your shoulders are or closer to the ground, the harder that will get. Just holding that is hard enough. And then with a kettlebell, it will really burn. Kettlebells really are so versatile. I found it really hard to narrow it down to 6 exercises, but I chose ones that I felt really corresponded to the muscle groups that will work with running, with obviously that focus on the posterior chain. Now, I'm aware that lots of you might only have one kettlebell at home. That is me. Well, as a result, you're going to have to adapt accordingly because it might be too heavy for some of the exercises or too light for others. So hopefully you have enjoyed this video. Now, don't simply just hit the like button, but if you do want some more exercises or another follow-up video on how to get strong for running, please let me know in the comment section below. And if you've got any questions, well, I'll be there in the comments doing my best to answer them.